I cannot control the negative mailers that are sent daily, it seems now, saying that I'm a Trumper and I am a racist. And it's just so far from who I am.
As we close out October, the political full court press is well underway, and we are receiving information from everywhere. It can be a bit daunting to go through all that, but the good thing is the Long Beach Post has you covered. From profiles to compare your candidates to debates, we have everything you need to help you make an informed decision as you fill out your November 8th ballot. And now we can add the Word podcast to that as well. I'm going to sit down with both mayoral candidates and take a deeper dive into some of the questions that you might want to know. We begin today with Councilwoman Suzie Price on this week's The Word.
Watch this.
You are now listening to The Word with Jackie Ray.
Once again, welcome back to The Word. I am your host, Jackie Ray. I am very excited because I've been dying for this interview. Suzie and I have seen each other in passing, but I've never got to sit down and talk with her. And as we're approaching November, I thought now would be the perfect time to get you in, ask some questions, and really just get to know you. I know you are so busy, so thank you for taking the time to do this in person. I really
my
appreciate
pleasure.
it.
Of course, it's my pleasure.
So I really wanted to ask you just kind of a personal question to start off, because you do so much. You're a mom, you're a wife, you're a business owner, you're a deputy DA in Orange County, and you're a councilwoman here. How do you manage all of that effectively, give all of those things enough attention so you can be successful in all of those things?
Well, that's a really great question, and it assumes that I am successful in all of those things. I once heard a female chief of the California Supreme Court say that for her, balance was about a good hair day or a bad hair day. Sometimes you have it and sometimes you don't. And so I think for me, I try to do the very best that I can and focus on the task that's ahead of me. And like many working moms, sometimes I feel like I'm failing miserably in all of my hats that I wear. And sometimes I feel like I'm killing it and doing a really great job. It just really depends on the day. It depends on what gets thrown at you. And of course, when you're a mom, a lot of times it depends on how your kids' life is going at the time. Because if things aren't going well for them in their lives, it kind of impacts everything you're doing in your professional and personal life. And so I do my best to just try to compartmentalize and focus on the task ahead of me. And I'm a really, efficient person. So I make lists every day. I mean, from a practical aspect, I have a whole method of, making sure that I get through all my emails at the end of the day so that the next morning I don't wake up feeling like I'm behind. But just on any given day, sometimes I feel like I'm doing everything less than perfect. And that's just what I think a lot of working moms feel.
When you have those bad days, do you have a go-to way to kind of decompress from the day and lift yourself up a bit? Or does it change often?
Well, when I'm not in the campaign, I usually like to go for a walk. I love to go for a walk with my dog, and it's an opportunity for me to clear my head. I have a happy place that I go to, and I kind of sit down and just take a moment. But during the campaign, I haven't really had a chance to do that. So being at home at the end of the night with my husband and our 14-year-old son, because our oldest son's away at school, kind of grounds me and gets me ready for the next day, and is a good reminder for me that no matter what happened during the day, everything's going to be okay.
You mentioned the campaign, and you've been basically running this campaign, and you haven't been really public about this, but your mom was over in Iran right now in this very tough time. But she's home now. But can you speak a little bit about what the difficulties might have been for you to run a campaign knowing that your mom might have been in harm's way?
Well, so some people know this, some people don't know this, but my mom is a cancer patient. So she's a patient at City of Hope, and she's doing great. She has metastasized breast cancer. But, over the last 6 years or so, she takes a daily chemo pill. And over the last 6 years or so, I think she's been very focused on making sure she doesn't have any regrets in her life. And we've been very mindful in making sure that we support her endeavors. So, she left her country very abruptly to bring me here to America, and there was a lot of unfinished business for her. So she wanted to go back to finish some of that unfinished business. And for her, it was like a life journey. Like she wanted to do this. And so I was very hesitant about her going. I was hesitant about her going during the campaign, but it was important to her. So, we as a family supported her to go. So she went, and then while she was there, we had this brutal, brutal killing of Mahsa Amini. And then the protests started, and they cut off, we were communicating with her daily on WhatsApp. And then they immediately cut off internet. They cut off WhatsApp so that we couldn't communicate with her. And so there were 3 or 4 days in a row where we wouldn't hear from her. So I was super stressed out because the news that we were getting here in America, I knew wasn't telling the full story. And my biggest concern was, the government there monitors everything we're doing. And if a lot of people don't know our story, but my mother and I were not allowed to go back to the country. That's why we didn't see my father and sister for 21 years. We were not allowed back into the country. So I was really afraid that if I said anything or took a position against the government, that somehow it would flag her and she wouldn't be able to get out of the airport, because they'll take your passport away and they'll tell you can't leave the country. And so I was really nervous, but every day I've had meet and greets and canvassing and fundraisers and interviews. And so it kind of kept my mind off of it, thank goodness, because I think I would have been a nervous wreck, but for the campaign,
Right.
believe it or
Okay.
not. I had to kind of focus on the campaign and not think about my mom. But I'd be lying if I said that there weren't many nights where I woke up at 4 a.m. just in sheer panic about her safety. So she got back last week, and I'm really grateful that she's here.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that, because I think a lot of people sometimes, especially the voters, when we're looking at what you said in regard to the campaign, you have a whole personal life that is impactful. So congratulations to you for being able to effectively run a campaign in the middle of that.
Well, not only that, but in August, my mom was not here. I had to take my son away to college, which
right.
is
Yes.
a life-changing moment. My son and I are really, really close. My oldest son, his name is Keon, and we're super close. So I had to drop him off at college, which was really emotional. I did that the day after I turned 50, which for many women is a pivotal moment. Right. So I was like, I turned 50, I take my son away to school, and then my mom's not here. And it was just kind of like, okay, all I can do is focus on the campaign, control what you can control.
Right. Yes. No, congratulations on that. So I do want to talk about some things within the campaign. I was on your YouTube page, which I was glad to see that you have a YouTube page and that you're active on it, because I live on YouTube. But I was looking on your YouTube, and you were speaking to the Lakewood Village Neighborhood Association. And I've heard you say this a couple of times before, but for some reason it resonated with me when you said it then. And you said that you've spent your life in public service, and Councilman Rex Richardson has spent his life in politics. For me, when I think about a politician, what they should be is they should be for the people. They should be working for the people. So why do you think there's a distinct difference in public service when it comes to you and Councilman Rex Richardson?
So a number of things. I got my master's in public administration. My master's thesis was focused on city governments and how they deliver services. And so I kind of know from a very academic level what cities should do for their residents. But I also, when I left the Ventura DA's office, I worked as a city attorney for 2 years for a firm that represented 17 different cities and a lot of public entities. Like, we represented the Regional Center, we represented Orange County Transit Authority, Riverside Transit Authority. So I represented a lot of different public entities. I would go to council meetings. I would help draft ordinances. I would do arbitration hearings. I did, HR presentations. And so I kind of learned a lot about it. And generally speaking, people who run for public office, they're looking for a job. Not all the time, but a lot of times. They're looking for a job. And oftentimes, their job in elected office is the most prestigious and highest paying job they've ever received. To me, while I don't fault them for it, I think there's a different caliber of public official when you have someone who has a career outside of politics. Person who's had an experience, and not in every job, when you walk into a room and they say your name, everyone claps. Mm-hmm. That's not reality of jobs. Like sometimes on Tuesday nights when we're sitting there, I think it's great to thank people. I think it's wonderful to say thank you. But a lot of times we spend literally hours thanking people for doing their actual jobs. That doesn't happen in the real world. So I think having real world experience, especially in public service, is very important, because the world of politics, whether you work for an elected official or you are an elected official or you're an advocate on behalf of some group before elected officials is a very different world. It's not reality. And so I think it's, I've always said, people have asked me for years, do you think we should have a full-time council? Absolutely not. I don't want a bunch of politicians who are dependent on their next job being reelected for them to be able to pay their mortgage representing our city. To me, we want to have leaders who have a life and experience outside of politics because they can understand the world from a much different place. We talk about concepts all the time at City Council that sound really great in theory, but when you apply them practically, and maybe we'll get a chance to talk about some of them today, they don't work. They don't work. Like, we talk a lot about unarmed response teams for our mental health issues. In practice, sometimes things don't work out exactly the way we imagine if we've never actually done that work. And so I'm really proud of my work. My work, people often say, oh, prosecutor, it sounds like it's such a harsh job. It sounds like you're, want to put everyone behind bars. But, the work that we do as prosecutors, I think a lot of people don't know. When people are victimized, we help them find a voice in a system that really is not designed to give them a voice. I have specialties that I never thought I would have, dealing with child victims, dealing with baby death cases and homicides. These are not specialties that people are generally excited to acquire expertise in. But those cases in my career has taught me how to give voice to the voiceless and make them feel that somebody was there for them at the most scary and intimidating time of their life. And now on the other end, I'm involved in criminal justice reform and diversion programs and collaborative courts and reentry programs and mental health programs and recidivism reduction. And there's so many great things that I love about my career. And I think it makes me a better public elected official because I've been a public servant.
I agree with that. I actually worked with the Denver Police Department. That's how I got through school. I got a full ride scholarship doing that. And one of the things that I did was work with victim assistance with the police. And so, like you said, with sexual assault was the unit that I was in. So that was for me where I would see police officers shine because they were very, very good with the victims and and showing compassion and giving them resources to kind of deal with this, probably the biggest trauma, hopefully, that they'll ever go through. But at the same time, they failed on numerous occasions. So that was a small part of how they shined. But it didn't change the fact that they failed in a lot of areas. And then for you specifically, in that same debate, and I've heard you say this several times, that you want to hold police accountable. But as I'm kind of reading more about you and learning about you, in 2017, your office moved forward with prosecuting gay men who were basically targeted by the police department and entrapped in this lewd conduct sting that was basically illegal. And instead of really stepping up at that moment, and you probably had more power to do that then as a prosecutor, say, no, we're not going to take this case because what you did was wrong. You guys should not be doing that. And you didn't. You moved forward with that. So why didn't you hold them accountable then? And how can the people trust you to hold the police accountable now?
The investigation started because residents in that community were calling their council representatives and saying, there are condoms in the alleys, there are condoms in the parking lot, there's sex going on inside of this bookstore. And when this bookstore applied for a business license to be behind our home, we were insured as residents that there wouldn't be sexual activity there. So we want you as our council members to do something. The council then went to the police chief and said, this is true. When we adopted this bookstore, we did guarantee to everybody that there wasn't going to be sexual activity in the bookstore. So the Garden Grove Police Department, remember, I was in the homicide unit. I didn't even know this was going on, had an operation as a result of constituent concerns to investigate whether or not sex was happening in the bookstore. And sure enough, sex was happening in the bookstore. A case was filed and by a DA that was in the Westminster courthouse that was supervised by a different supervisor, not me. And by the time I got promoted in 2018 and got assigned to the Westminster courthouse, the case had already been filed and it had already gone through a number of motions called Murguia motions. Murguia motions are the ones that in Long Beach, the court heard on a similar case arising out of a bathroom. The case in Long Beach did not proceed past the Murguia motions because the judge found that the conduct was discriminatory in nature. The Murguia motions that went through on this case, before I even got to the court, all succeeded and the case proceeded to trial. It was assigned to a specific prosecutor and I had nothing to do with filing the case. The case was brought to my attention by the defense attorney. Her name is Stephanie Lofton. She's endorsing my campaign for mayor. And Stephanie asked if I would dismiss the case. And I said, given the history of this case and I didn't file it and it's assigned to a different prosecutor, I don't have authority to dismiss this case, but I can ask the district attorney, but I can make you an offer that's lower. So I made her the lowest offer that I could, but she wanted the case dismissed. I forwarded the case to the district attorney. The district attorney reviewed the case and declined to dismiss it because it had been through so much litigation already, and the courts had said there was no discriminatory practice. The case went to trial, and the witness from the bookstore testified that the area where the sexual activity happens is a private area. It's not a public area, and only men are allowed to go back there. Well, one of the elements of that crime is that the area has to be open to the public. So that fact was different than what was in the police reports than it was at trial. The jury came back with a not guilty verdict, as they should have. I immediately met with the LGBTQ Center in Orange County. We devised a program whereby they would come and talk to law enforcement about cultural competence in LGBTQ matters. I prepared a curriculum for the police officer standards and training post-training on the subject of LGBTQ cultural competence. That curriculum is under review and hopefully will be accepted. It will be the only and first cultural competence class that is offered for the LGBTQ community that is post-certified in the state of California. And then beyond that, I created a training for the Garden Grove Police Department, which I'm happy to share with you, that went through the rulings in the Long Beach case. And since I presented that training to them in April of 2020 via Zoom, they've ceased that operation because it was in the middle of COVID when I did the training. They've ceased the operation and there has not been one case filed or one arrest made out of that operation. And I'm very proud of that because I took a situation that was really out of my control and I turned it into a learning opportunity for the police department, for our district attorneys, and made sure that the practice moving forward was rooted in the law. There's always going to be situations where justice is not served, but the system is designed, if done right, for justice to be served. So a district attorney is not supposed to file cases unless they can prove the facts beyond a reasonable doubt. So when I tell you I made an offer in that case, it's because based on the evidence that was in the police report and the motions that had been litigated, we believed the elements of the crime. So every crime has elements like recipes, ingredients in a recipe. You have to meet each element beyond a reasonable doubt. That's our standard before we even file the case. That's the standard of prosecutors. So if we don't believe we can prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt, we don't file it. If there's new evidence that's presented before trial, we dismiss the charges. If there's evidence presented that might cause a doubt on the credibility of witnesses, we might consider dismissing the case. So a lot of that happens before a case actually goes to trial. There are a lot of discussions leading up to trial where people are asked to reevaluate the case and whether it should be filed at all, or whether it should proceed at all, right? So the multiple stages where defense attorneys get involved, sometimes pre-filing, sometimes between the arraignment and the trial, the defense attorneys get involved and will ask you to reevaluate a case. And we dismiss cases all the time if the evidence isn't there to prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So the system is designed to have really two fail-safes before a case gets to trial or a plea. One is the district attorney's evaluation of the case. The second is the defense attorney's advocacy on the case. And so if both of those measures fail, then yes, there is sometimes, what you talked about, a major injustice. And that does happen. But there are so many fail-safes in place to make sure that doesn't happen.
And I love how you said there's, basically checks and balances. That's definitely going to require more research on my part because I do know that Black people in this country are sentenced 5 times harsher. That stings a little bit more now that you're saying that there's checks and balances in place to prevent something like that. Do you have any insight as to why that is?
I think we have a broken system. And I think we're trying to make some progress to make sure that we take steps forward, not backwards. I think systemic racism is real, and it's very much real in the justice system, starting from who's pulled over, who's coming into contact with the police, all the way through the justice system. And so, I think there's a lot of research on why that reality exists. People will argue different things. People will argue it's the court system. It's the lack of strong advocacy by the defense. It's the overly aggressive aspect of the prosecution. There are multiple theories, but at the end of the day, it's a broken system, and we have a responsibility to make sure that we fix it for today's generation and the generations to come. And I'm very proud to be in a leadership position where I have the opportunity to offer suggestions and program ideas and policy ideas that are going to help shape the system moving forward to be more positive.
You've just answered 3 of my questions in one answer. Good job. I do want to, the Todd Spitzer situation, your boss, there was a case that you ended up taking over where he basically used the N-word and said that, he did use the N-word, might not have been in that case, but there's documented that he used the N-word. And in that specific case, he cited basically this black man perhaps dated a white woman to improve his stature in life. And with me personally, it's very, very rare. I mean, and history has proven this as well. It's very rare that by the time something like that gets out to the public, that's a one-off. That's just when they got caught. So I know you said it was a big office, but has there been instances that, whether you want to go into details about it or not, where you heard or witnessed levels of racism? And if so, how did you address that?
There are 2 different situations that you're talking about with DA Spitzer. The first was during a special circumstances meeting on a case called People v. Bugs.
Right.
I was not in that special circumstances meeting. I was a branch court manager at the time, overseeing the Westminster Courthouse. I wouldn't even been invited to that meeting.
Right, I know that.
So I didn't hear.
And you took over that case.
Yeah,
right?
I didn't hear the comment. But by the time the comment was brought to light, which was almost a year later, I had then been promoted to the position that I have now. And because everybody that supervises homicide cases was in that room when the comment was made, they were all conflicted off of the case. So I was brought in to take over the supervision of the case to ensure that no rights were violated, both for the victim and for the defendant moving forward, and that the trial proceeded with extreme diligence to make sure that no one's rights were violated. So I did oversee the supervision of that case. I was very involved in that case. It went to verdict. The defendant was sentenced, and there was, from the time I took over the case until the sentence, there was no issues involving racial bias. The comment about Todd using the N-word, my understanding, and I could be wrong, is that he was making a speech to the Iranian Bar Association, and in the speech, he was talking about hate crimes, and he was quoting a defendant that is a charged defendant in the county, and using verbatim the words of that defendant. So he was repeating the words of a defendant.
Which most people wouldn't. Most people would say the N-word. They would not say the actual word.
Absolutely. I certainly would not. Absolutely. But I just wanted to make sure that that was clear, because there's different contexts in which the word could be used. And I just wanted to make sure that he should probably not have repeated someone else's really vulgar words.
I don't want to say probably. He definitely shouldn't have said it at all. But I think that's still, there's a level. And again, I'm making an assumption because that word is founded in hate. It's an ugly word.
Absolutely.
It's a disgusting word. And you have to have a level of comfort to use that word. I don't think Black people should use the word, but it doesn't sting to me as much as when a person who is white or not Black uses it. And I think when you're at his position in life, you understand what that word is. You understand what it means. And if you feel comfortable using it, it would be impossible for you to convince me that you don't feel comfortable using that in other instances where you're not quoting someone.
I hear you, Jackie. I mean, I wasn't there when he made the speech, and I only saw it on video like everybody else. And I don't know how that word could come out of somebody's mouth, so I get it. But I just wanted to make sure that I clarified these are two different situations. In terms of me, I mean, what I did when the comments that were made on the Bugs case came to light, I reached out to all of my Black and brown employees because I knew that there was an uncomfortable conversation that needed to be had. And we had a great conversation that was based on healing and moving forward, what do we do as an office? So I'm very proud that I've been involved and tangentially, I'm not the one that organized it, but we're going to have an elimination of bias training that's going to be an office-wide training. It's coming up on the 20th this week. And one of my employees who is she's one of the managers in our office, Black woman, she took the lead on this. She said, it's important to me that we do this. And I said, absolutely. She works directly under my supervision. And she reached out to a university professor at UCLA, and they're going to come and they're going to do this training. And it's going to be an interactive training. And she's really procured the training over several months. And my experience has been that the office has been really open to it and wanting to do this. And I think, in terms of whether I've experienced, I've never, ever, not once experienced anyone in upper management say anything racist around me.
When you did that,
could be because I'm Persian. I don't know.
When you did when you really kind of spoke to your colleagues there about the tough conversations, did any of them share with you experience that they had that was negative, where they felt they were discriminated against, or they've heard these kinds of things said?
Outside of the office, for sure. Yeah, not inside the office. No. Okay. Nobody shared that with me inside the office, but people shared this is a trigger because these stereotypes to set us back, or this is not how we want the world to see, our justice system. And I mean, we had some very good conversations, I think. And I supervised for a while there. I supervised a minority-majority courthouse, meaning that I had more people of minority backgrounds working for me than I had white background. And so, I mean, you talk to anyone who's ever worked for me after George Floyd, after this incident, I have those difficult conversations. It's important because I don't want everybody walking around on eggshells inadvertently offending one another. So I've shared with my team, like, we're a family, we're a work family. And we need to have these honest conversations. I don't want you having them in silos or in groups. I want us having them like a kitchen table and talking about that stuff. And I think that has helped us a lot, be able to think from the perspective of somebody else, Yeah,
I think you've kind of set a precedent in this conversation, and something that I know for sure that you've done, because I've talked to people, and one of the things that did make me cringe is in December, I believe it was December of 2020, there was a conversation where we're really kind of figuring out what mess we're in with the pandemic. And Dr. Anissa Davis was on that call, and she was, just giving all the medical history that I feel like all of us felt a little overwhelmed by. But there was a moment when, even though you knew her background of going to Stanford and studying at Stanford Medical School, that you asked her to share her credentials, basically to quantify her position to other people. That's how it felt to me as a Black woman, because I've been in those situations where we're all having a conversation, but then I have to explain the reason why I'm in the room. I heard her take a sigh where she was like, okay. And I know that sigh. That was like, okay, I have to explain why I'm here in the room. But I also know that people reached out to you and said, okay, this is why, because I know Councilmember Richardson kind of vaguely glossed over, her having to explain that. But I know you didn't just leave it on the table like that. I know you took steps to understand what she might have been feeling in that moment and how other people might have felt in that moment. And I don't know if that's been shared as much as it should have been. So can you kind of talk about that moment and why you felt it necessary to take steps, behind closed doors regarding that moment?
Sure. I mean, the first thing I will say is one of the lessons learned from that situation is it doesn't matter what your intent is, it's how you made somebody else feel. Mm-hmm. And how I made her and others feel in that moment is real. And I want to acknowledge that, and I want to make sure that I don't do anything like that again. It's very important to me. Mm-hmm. I think for me, I'm a lawyer. And we have to set the foundation of an expert witness in court before we can ask anybody to believe them.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the biggest things that we were hearing at the time is Dr. Ferrer doesn't have a medical degree. Dr. Ferrer is making all these rules and she doesn't have a medical degree. I was really proud of the fact that our health officer has a medical degree. And I didn't know that that was required because Dr. Ferrer doesn't have one, but she's technically not the health officer.
Right.
I didn't know those nuances. To me, it was like, whoa, unlike LA, we have a health officer who's not just a doctor, but she's an amazing doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So probably when I look back at the way that went, I probably should have started with something like that instead of starting with the questions that were tough. Maybe the tone would have made a difference. It's not so much what I said. I think it's also how I said it.
Right.
And so, yeah, I reached out. Well, first of all, I didn't know about the letter that was written, except that it was sent to me by a reporter.
Oh, that's how you found out?
That's how I found out about it.
That had to be jarring.
It was. I was literally reading the letter on my phone while I was driving my son to rowing and just horrified, when you have that kind of trauma where there's tingling in the back of your neck. Like I couldn't believe it was happening. And then I immediately went home and tried to Google every single one of the women's email addresses to try to get in touch with them. And I emailed and or messaged every single one of them on Facebook. And I said, I received this letter. I wish I could have an opportunity to talk with you. That wasn't my intent. Please, can I have an opportunity to talk with you? Not one got back to me. Not one. A few months later, a friend of mine negotiated a meeting between me and one of the women, and it was a beautiful meeting. It was a great moment of healing. And one of the women actually came to the meeting with a list of here's what you can do to help Black women in the city of Long Beach. And I went to work immediately. In fact, getting one of them a position on a private company board of directors, because they were looking for another member and they wanted to have a woman and they wanted to have some diversity. And so and it's a paid position, and I got her that. And I really went to work on what commission openings do we have? What can we do? If there was something that came up, I set up a meeting with Linda Tatum, who's our assistant city manager, to meet with these women. I invited Gabby, who on my staff, who is a Black woman, to also mentor and learn from these women. So I tried very hard to take it to heart, but I learned a lot of great lessons, that there are things that sometimes people say to me in my culture and background that triggers something that they may not understand. Well, that's true for other people too. Right. And I just have learned a huge lesson from it, and it was a great opportunity, I think, to heal and grow. And I appreciated the people who called me into that conversation, because when people call you out and they don't even know you, it's very hard to not come from a place of defensiveness and fear. But when people call you into the conversation, you're so much more inclined to want to listen and learn and grow. And to me, that's true partnership.
That kind of calls to mind. I know there was a moment in time where Councilman Richardson, while we're going through unfortunately, the murder of George Floyd, he had said something to the effect, don't quote me on this, but something to the effect of, we have a tale of two cities, basically two types of Long Beach. And you said you didn't like that narrative because you said it was divisive. Do you think that Long Beach is equal across the board?
No, I don't.
So why is the narrative that there's two different sides, why do you think that's divisive rather than factual?
Because I think that rhetoric by its very nature says tale of two cities. There's this half and there's this half. We are one city, and we're one city that should be working together to help lift up all of Long Beach. But that, to me, doesn't mean we're two cities. We're one city. We're working together. I came from a country where this feeling of haves versus the have-nots led to a political revolution. And the country is not any better for it. It was the folks that were perceived to be the elite, the higher class, that the people that were in the underserved communities felt were getting all of the benefits and all the resources. And there was an uprising and there was a revolution. And now it's a third world country. Nobody has jobs. Nobody has access to food. There's government sanctions. To me, the best thing to do in a city like ours, as diverse as it is to acknowledge the differences. And instead of pointing out what others have that you may not have, is to talk about what you need. What do you need to help you thrive? And how can we as city leaders make that happen? Because not everybody needs the same thing. Some people may need more. And that's important. And I don't think anybody is opposed to that. But I think the judgment that goes along with Tale of Two Cities rhetoric divides.
Do you feel like it's this saying, that I'm sure a lot of people heard, but my dad used to always say, the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So maybe a lot of these people are just not coming to these city council meetings. Do you think that that's their first step, is to come more and let the council know what's going on in their communities?
I don't know about coming to council, because my residents don't come to council meetings hardly ever. But I think contacting their council member. I mean, I tell everyone my council district has trained me to be the most responsive mayor that this city will ever have. Because if we don't respond to calls within, a reasonable amount of time, which is usually 24, 48 hours, they will light me up on nextdoor.com for sure. Right? It's like my own Yelp. They will be writing a letter to the Grunion. They will be making sure that my residents will say to me, you work for me. You work for me. I am your employer. And that's their expectation. So yeah, I think residents throughout the city need to expect more of their council members all around the city. They need to expect and demand responsiveness. And for me, my focus is on customer service. I did my master's thesis on what would happen if cities treated their residents like businesses treat their customers. How would service delivery change? And the results were profound. When we studied different cities, and I defended my master's thesis, I said, if cities looked at residents like businesses look at customers, the satisfaction of the residents in their city governments would shoot way up.
Right.
It's just a matter of solving problems for people. That's what people want. They want you to solve problems. Now, there are problems that are huge, that are not easy to solve, very complex problems. And those, I think people would be a lot more inclined to say, okay, we're going to partner on those longer term problems if they feel that their shorter term problems are being addressed. And sometimes if they feel that their shorter term problems aren't being addressed, they don't have any faith that we're going to be able to solve the longer term problems. So to me, I would run, as mayor, I would run on a very customer service oriented focus. That's what our residents deserve. They deserve a city hall that's listening to them. That doesn't mean we always agree, but it means that you're listened to and that we're looking at your ideas and we're looking at your concerns and we're giving them meaningful consideration. That's important.
When I first moved to LA, and I'm sad to say I don't get the opportunity to volunteer as much as I did when I first moved to LA, but I used to volunteer all the time, and some of the stories and things that I would hear about, of course the homelessness part is heartbreaking, but for me oftentimes it was the road that led to the homelessness that was even more, heartbreaking. And when you did the debate, you said the answer to homelessness isn't housing, it's part of it, but you really kind of focused in on outreach and making sure people had access to mental health care services, addiction services.
There are a lot of nonprofits that offer outreach and connect you to a service provider that offers temporary housing. Okay. Now, we've been working really closely with landlords in the city to get them to a point where they're willing to trust the city and accept housing vouchers. And we're starting to see a lot of progress. In fact, on Sunday, we had a forum, a mayor's forum at church in East Long Beach.
Okay.
And one of the questions to both candidates was posed by a man by the name of Clark. And he is homeless and he has a housing voucher. And he asked us some questions about housing. I went up to him after the meeting, gave him my cell phone number. He called me that night, and today I connected him with housing. 1-bedroom apartment. They're going to accept his housing voucher. And it was me reaching out to a group of housing providers that came to my workshop on accepting Section 8 vouchers, and they're willing to do it. So I connected his case manager from Mental Health America, and Clark has a son named Spencer, and he showed us all a picture of Spencer in the forum. So Spencer and Clark are going to have a home. So it's not, and Clark went through services through St. Luke's. Okay. And was able to kind of stabilized through the support of St. Luke's and had transitional housing but does not have permanent housing.
Gotcha.
So for me, outreach leads to transitional housing and services. They will not succeed in housing without supportive services, without a caseworker who's advocating for them. We have a woman who was experiencing homelessness in the east side of Long Beach, and she would often be without her pants, and lots of complaints from residents. And she ended up getting arrested for trespass, and she got arrested for trespass during COVID. So the jails have currently even still a requirement that if you get taken in, there is a quarantine upon intake for 10 days. So you don't get to go see your judge in 48 hours if you're brought in. And for whatever reason, you're not booked and released. Most crimes, you're booked and released, most misdemeanors. But people that have a warrant will get kept until their arraignment. Well, she was quarantined for 10 days. As soon as we found out she was there, I contacted the city prosecutor's office. We worked with the social worker they have on their team there. We worked with the jail clinician. The jail clinician met with her. She ended up getting COVID during those 10 days, so she was quarantined for an additional 10 days. What that did was it gave her 20 days to work with the jail clinician who determined that she had a mental illness and get her medicated. By the time she got in front of the judge, she was medicated. She was released from court to her caseworker. Her caseworker took her to a group home. She continued to take her daily medication. She got a job at McDonald's. She was doing great. She transitioned to independent living. She fell off of her medication, landed back on 2nd Street, doing all the same things. So then they arrested her again. She had some warrants out of Orange County. They brought her there. I sent the healthcare department to the jail to interview her and talk to her about services. She wasn't interested. She didn't want any services. She didn't have enough time to be assessed and get, the full psychological assessment. They weren't going to let her go, though, because she had a warrant out of San Bernardino.
Right.
So this is all for one person.
Right.
When she went to San Bernardino, she accepted a service in San Bernardino. So that just goes to show you how much is involved in that outreach process to get somebody to accept an assessment. Because accepting a service means you're opening yourself up to be assessed and for mental health or substance abuse. Because most of the time, and if you've done the homeless count, I've done the homeless count, when you go out there, you have a list of questions to ask. The first one is, are you suffering from a mental illness? Most people are going to say no.
Yeah.
Are you taking drugs or do you have an addiction problem? Most people are going to say no. They don't know who you are. They don't want you to search their belongings for good reason. But are you suffering from a financial hardship? Everybody says yes, but you don't know what the root cause of that financial hardship is. So those that have been evicted or lost their job are generally the ones that are easiest for us to place into affordable housing if we can get them a voucher and connect them with a housing provider. It's the other groups that you need to have that robust outreach. So they're not ready for housing today. And so I just think that I have a heart for it. But I also understand how people feel that we can't turn over our public spaces to be outdoor housing because it's not compassionate for anybody. And we have to try to connect people with services. And we can do that. I believe that we are ignoring the resources we already have. We keep talking about what we need. This is an amazing city with a lot of compassionate people, with a lot of nonprofits wanting to help. We have so much access. We have so much at our fingertips that we don't realize we do. And we need to tap into that. We need to tap into the compassion of the landlords. We need to tap into the compassion of the nonprofits, and we need to make them better partners in this city.
I did so much reading on you before, this interview, but I don't think the reading did you any justice. Like sitting across from you right now and just seeing and literally your face lights up when you have these ideas about things that can change people's lives. And again, I don't know how many times in this interview you said, I gave her my phone number. Like do you think you'll continue to be this accessible to people as mayor?
Totally. It's the only way I know how to be.
Okay.
I mean, I'm going to be super hands-on. I'm going to be a working mayor. I'm going to be walking the streets and having lunch locally every day. And I'm going to be going to neighborhood meetings. I'm still going to do my monthly meetings. I'm still going to take calls. I'm going to help the council members be as successful as they can in their own districts. But that's just the only way I know how to be. I'm super, super hands-on.
I mean, I can tell. I don't think I've given my number to as many people as you have.
Everybody
I'm a reporter.
Everybody has my cell phone. Everybody has my cell phone.
I think that's so great. Now, if you do become mayor, you will be the first Persian mayor. how much pride do you have, and how when you look back at your life and you look at this moment, does it just make you smile a little bit?
Yeah, it does. I have to say, I'm going to tear up. I have to say, I don't think about it from a personal accomplishment standpoint. It's not about, a record, the first this or the first that for me. But I think about my mom and the difficult decisions she made.
Yeah.
To get me to this point. So I think it would be, we have a really unusual journey that there's not even, no amount of writing about it could explain it to people. I mean, to leave your father and sister behind and your country's going through a whole revolution and end up in a new country and you're a latchkey kid, you don't speak a word of English and you don't have any money, you barely graduate high school. I mean, Long Beach, all I can say is Long Beach State changed my life. And I'm here because of that school.
I think a lot of politicians, they look ahead instead of really looking at this moment in time and how I can help this city. They kind of look at how can this get me to my next political plateau. Is that true for you, or
No.
is this where you want to be?
I've had an amazing career that I'm super proud of for 24 years. I'm eligible to retire, but I've got so much left in me. I probably could stay there for another 15 years or however long they needed me. I'm making that office a better place, and I'm making the justice system better, and I'm proud of that work. But I care about the city. I have a debt of gratitude to this city. It's the first place I've ever called home, and it's the only city my boys have ever known as home. So the future of the city is important to me, and I think it's very rare in politics to have a candidate that says and truly means, I'm not going anywhere. This is it. It's the end of the line for me, proudly, not in a negative way, proudly. I've worked really hard to be here, and it would be an honor of my life's career to serve a city I love. There is nothing better for me. I love my career, and leaving a career that I love to serve a city I love at a cost to my family, by the way, to me is an honor, and it's a privilege. And I respect the journey. I mean, my philosophy every day is I ask myself almost every day, how do you define success? I talk to myself a lot. I'm not crazy, but I do talk to myself.
We just talked about that before you got here.
I say, how are you going to define success today? And to me, success is not about the outcome. It's about showing up at my best, as my best self every day, and controlling the things I can control and accepting with grace the things I can't control. I cannot control the negative mailers that are sent daily, it seems now, saying that I'm a Trumper and I am a racist, and it's just so far from who I am. I cannot control that, but I can control the grace I show in the work that I do, and I can control those things. And I've had a career where you can't control what the jury's going to do. You don't know what the jury's going to do. You just have to give it your best. And so that has prepared me for this journey. Because I think we need a mayor with their eyes on Long Beach.
I haven't had the opportunity to talk to you one-on-one. Jason is our political reporter, so all I know about you is what I read, and it does not translate. And I sincerely mean that. And I thank you for coming and sharing your authentic self with our listeners, because they're definitely going to appreciate it. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Now, don't forget to visit lbpost.com to compare your candidates as well as a profile on Suzie Price. And make sure you're subscribed to this podcast, because later in the week we have Councilman Rex Richardson. And don't forget, if you have to speak a word, make it a good one.